Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. And the usual things we got to remind you of, you've been staring at these things for the last 20 minutes, but anything you type in the chat box will be visible to the moderators. It gives us a lot of laughs to see what you're trying to say on the side, but remember that we can see those things, so don't embarrass yourself. Remember about the microphone button on the lower left corner. If you want to speak, you will punch that button, and when you are done, if you will turn that off, that will reduce the amount of feedback and lower the audio quality for everyone else. So just turn that off when you're done. We are recording this session, so keep that in mind. It will be available at a later date, and Lucy would like to also remind the agents to register this on the LMS system so we can do our normal thing that we have to do, is keeping up with stuff. So again, this is the 2010. We have gone to a little bit different calendar of doing this every 2 months instead of just the 4 during the season. So we hope that that suits you all. And you'll be able to access all this information and the handouts and speakers at a later time whenever you are interested. So Lucy did a dirty trick on me and punched in that picture, so I can't really figure out how to cover that up at the moment. But today's program, we've got Charlotte Glenn from Pender County, Amy Marshall from Anson, Linda Blue, of course, from Buncombe County, and our featured speaker is Matt Martin. We'll be talking about turf management, and we have our usual suspects of David Steffen will be talking about insects, and Mike Munster will do the plant pathology of the day. So if you have any questions during any of these presentations, you can either type them in the box and we can then catch up to the speaker and ask those if they don't see those, or you can raise your hand and we will try to, we'll let you speak your question verbally. Now, Lee J. Hicks is our awesome moderator here who is taking care of everything, and if it weren't for her, we'd all be looking at a blank screen. So we need to thank her. Lee J., are there any questions or anything that you want to bring us up to speed on? Reminders. Ah, here she is.
Here I am. Thanks, Steve. No, I think that we are all getting to be old pros at Illuminate. Again, if you have questions, you can raise your hand. I can respond to you via chat. And, you know, let me know. If there are websites that come across, I will put them in the chat box so you can click on them and use them for yourself. Remember, there are the check and X right under the participant list. Those might change to A, B, C, and D to get your user feedback on questions. Typically, Mike and Dave have a lot of good questions for you. And again, if you need anything, type in the chat. Take it away, Steve.
All right, excellent. Okay, Charlotte, if you are there, take over. She's going to talk to us about what she's seen in the Pender County area, or anything that is of interest to her that we might like to hear. Charlotte?
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so I'm here in Pender County, which is out on the coast, and you can see that. I'm going to move to my next slide. What we have seen lately is that it's been very, very hot. In the month of June, we were up in the 90s, 20 out of 30 days, and a lot of those days it was above the mid-90s. So we've had a lot of hot weather. We kind of had July during June, so I don't know what to expect for July. I know a lot of folks were hot across the state. We saw a lot of our nighttime lows in the upper 70s, almost 80 degrees for a low temperature at night. So what this has caused is a lot of folks calling with vegetable problems or not having a lot of vegetable production. The hot weather causes a lot of stress, so we've seen a lot of blossom drop in tomatoes where the flowers just don't set fruit and the flowers just fall off. So lots of calls about that and emails about that this past month, and it's mostly just related to the heat. A lot of poor fruit set and cucurbits like melons and cucumbers and squash. Those are for the squash that haven't already been killed by squash vine borer or squash bugs, because we saw a lot of those starting off kind of early this season. What I noticed a lot is, particularly in some of the cucurbits like watermelons and cantaloupes, they had set a crop earlier, and those melons or cantaloupes kept developing, but any new little melons or cantaloupes that came on during this very hot weather just kind of shriveled up and never developed. So you've got that initial crop, but there's not more coming on following that, and I believe it's related to the hot weather. Also a lot of blossom end rot in tomatoes, and I've heard more reports of blossom end rot in peppers than usual, and that's a calcium deficiency. But usually, especially here at the coast, we have plenty of calcium in the soil. A lot of our well water comes from limestone aquifers, so we tend to have more problems with people having hard water with really high levels of calcium. So most of the time when we see blossom end rot, it's a problem related to plants being stressed, not being able to move the calcium into the fruits, people over-fertilizing, too much nitrogen, plants growing really rapidly, they just won't move the calcium in, or uneven watering. So the most important thing I've been trying to tell people to do is to keep especially their tomatoes, watered very evenly, not letting them dry out and then water them real heavily. And that's especially true for tomatoes in containers, because we get a lot of calls from people growing tomatoes in containers where they have a lot of blossom end rot problems. So more vegetable problems we've been seeing. Something new this year is a resurgence of tomato spotted wilt virus. We always seem to have a lot of tomato spotted wilt virus here in Pender County. We've got one big commercial tomato grower, and he tells me that Burgaw is the epicenter for tomato spotted wilt virus. I don't know if that's true, but that's his take on things. We saw a lot of tomato spotted wilt virus early this year. I had the first case on April 1st, I believe, which is the earliest I've ever seen it. It causes these real distinct to me they look almost like tattoos, these circular ring lines, real distinct on the foliage. The thing I noticed this year, or of course in all years, is when it infects young plants, new transplants, they die very rapidly. And of course this is a disease that's spread by thrips, and the only way you can combat it is to plant resistant varieties. I've listed some of the resistant varieties here that we are finding available in Pender County because we've had a lot of problems with tomato spotted wilt virus here for several years. A lot of our local nurseries are starting to carry these resistant varieties, so they are becoming a lot more available to homeowners. But what I've seen this year is another round of tomato spotted wilt virus. So in the past few years it's been something that showed up early, saw it in April and May, then didn't really see it for the rest of the summer. But I've had some samples brought in. I've had some tomatoes in my own garden that have recently contracted tomato spotted wilt virus. And the difference I've noticed when it goes to an older plant is it doesn't kill the plant nearly as quickly. The plant looks really bad. It has the real distinct patterns on the leaves, and it dies back from the top. But it's a much slower death. But I still think they're definitely going to die, and they should be rogued out. I don't know how many other folks across the state are seeing a lot of tomato spotted wilt virus. If that's something that you're seeing a lot of, put up a green check. Don't see anything. Okay, a few people. Howard Wallace, yeah, close by our area. Not much out in Caldwell. We do have some little kits here at our extension office where we can actually test for the virus. They were purchased several years ago, and we continue to use them. They continue to give us positive results. That you put some of the leaf tissue in, squish it up, and put a little stick in there, and it tells you if it's positive or negative. So I would imagine the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic could help some of the county offices figure out where to purchase those if that's something you're interested in. But those have been very handy for us. Of course, all the typical tomato problems keep coming in. We've seen a lot of bacterial wilt and southern stem blight. These both live in the soil, and there's just not anything somebody can do once the plants start to come down with these. And there aren't any resistant varieties unless people are able to get plants that have been grafted on resistant rootstocks. And that's a program that Frank Lowe's, or a process Frank Lowe's is working with, and he has been working with one of the growers here in Pender County this year who has problems with both bacterial wilt and southern stem blight. And he has been able to put out some of these grafted plants at this grower's fields, and we're going to see, you know, how well this rootstock stands up to both of these diseases. I think that there's probably an opportunity for some small-scale production by somebody with a greenhouse who wants to get into doing something specialized, doing some of these grafted tomatoes. I'm trying to find somebody here in Pender County willing to do it. Then, of course, early blight has already started, and you get these zonal leaf spots, and you know, it keeps moving. It starts from the bottom and keeps moving up the plant. One interesting thing that I heard this year is that one homeowner reported to me that they had very good control of early blight using Bacillus subtilis, which is related to BT that's used for caterpillar control. I know that's not a research-based recommendation, but it is the first report I've heard of somebody having good success with that product, which is used in organic production, and I have actually seen available at the big box stores this year. So it would be an interesting thing for folks to try out if they don't want to use synthetic pesticides. Another thing I've had this year is a high number of mysterious cucurbits brought in, and this is one, the most recent one. And does anybody know what this is or recognize it? I did get a positive ID from Jonathan Schulteis, but I wanted to see if anybody else has ever seen anything like this. A green check, maybe, if you've ever seen anything like this. Okay, Sampson County. Did you get it identified? Well, what this is an Armenian cucumber, and this one was about 22 inches long. The fellow who grew it actually bought the seed as English cucumber. His other plants made normal English cucumbers, and then he had this one rogue, and this is, I'm told, tastes like a cucumber. It's generally harvested when it's about a foot long and diced up, and the whole thing is used. It's not peeled. So I think this one's a bit past its prime. It's also sometimes called the snake melon or Armenian cucumber. I believe it has several common names, the yard-long cucumber. But I just thought it was unusual because I've had so many people bring these things in this year. I've had 2 people bring in what looked like spaghetti squash that came off of plants that were supposed to be summer yellow squash that they grew from seed, and I had another call about a mysterious melon that I haven't actually seen yet. I was just curious as well if folks are getting a lot of reports of unusual cucurbits. Green check maybe if you're getting a lot of folks calling about this type of stuff. I was wondering if maybe one of the big seed suppliers had got some of their seed stock mixed up. I don't see anybody else reporting that they're getting a lot of these. Maybe it's a Pender County phenomenon. Then last of all, I just wanted to end up and say, even though it has been hot, we have had some rain sporadically, and that has brought out the rain lilies. This is supposed, the rain lilies are a great little perennial bulb, at least in zone 7. They're very heat tolerant, and the fun thing about them is they only bloom after it rains. So it's kind of something that they just spring out. You have a little shower of rain. About 5 to 7 days later, they'll just have hundreds of blossoms. They'll last for a few days, and they'll be gone until it rains again. So it just brings really nice little splashes of color now and again. There's lots of varieties. This one in the picture specifically is called La Buffa Rosa, and it's actually a seed strain, so it can be a bit variable, pink or white flowers or blushed pink flowers like you see in the top picture. They like moist soil. They'll bloom in sun. They actually hold their blossoms a little better if they're in part shape, particularly here at the coast. But they're just a lot of fun to have in the garden, and some of the bulb companies are now carrying the bulbs. You plant them in the spring, and I've also seen them available as plants grown in pots. So something neat to have in the garden. And that's all I had today. Any questions or comments?
Do we have any questions for Charlotte? I think you described my vegetable garden pretty well with all those maladies, really. You have a question from Mike?
So Mike, I think, is saying he's also had one of these strange squash things brought in.
Yeah, that was just a comment.
Okay, well,
and I know Paige Burns had sent out a picture about a month ago, the same time I was getting the ones in that looked like spaghetti squash, that she had one that looked just the same as what I was getting. I really wonder if somebody got their seed mixed up.
okay.
Hello.
Thank you, Charlotte.
I have a question.
Okay, we do have another question. Go ahead.
Yes, this is
One
Linda.
more question.
Yes, Linda from Pascotown County. I don't have tomatoes at this point because we just moved into a new house, but we do have a coral bark maple, and the same condition that the tomato experienced the spotted wilt virus, where it starts to die quickly above and works its way down. It seems to be the same process going on. I don't know if anyone's heard about this condition or not, or whether it is something that applies to other plants other than tomatoes.
Tomato spotted wilt virus that I know of doesn't infect woody plants, but there are quite a few annuals and perennials it infects, and it's very closely related to impatiens necrotic spot virus. And I've actually had it infect some perennials in my yard. I would imagine, you know, without seeing the Japanese maple, they are they're not drought tolerant, and it has been very hot, so you may be seeing some drought stress, or you may be seeing some root damage. If it's dying from the top back, it might be something going on in the root system, or just simply hot weather and dry.
All right, thank you very much, and maybe Mike will, if he's got some comments, we'll add them in just a little bit later about any problems with maples that could be going on. So thank you very much, Charlotte. And now we're going to talk to somebody from a county that begins with A, and that's Amy Marshall. Amy, are you there?
I am here, thank you. Yep, so I'm Amy Marshall. I've been working as a horde agent in Anson for 3 years, and you know, a lot of people, I'll tell them I'm from Anson County, and not real sure where that is, so I'm going to talk about the county a little bit, tell you something about it. I mean, unless you're from Charlotte and driving to the beach and going back and forth, it's about the only time anyone would drive through Anson County. But tell you a little bit, oh, there I am, tell you a little bit about it. We're just a small rural agricultural county of about 25,000, so there's not many of us living there. We border South Carolina, and we're kind of along the Sandhills Piedmont line. Our largest employer is just the agribusiness sector, and it's like 20% of the employment there, and got about 487 farms, and most of our big production areas are broilers, turkeys, soybeans, corn, and about 73% of the county is forested, so we're real big into forestry as well. And so since property values were reassessed earlier this year, I've been doing a lot of forestry management plans over here. And we do have a couple of large nurseries. White Elf Farms, it's a half-acre greenhouse nursery. They're kind of an outpost of their main nursery, Roundtree Plantations in Charlotte. In Bentwood Nursery, they've got 85 acres of containerized evergreen shrubs, and they sell mainly to Home Depot stores throughout the southeast. And so I'm just going to go on and tell you about a few beekeeping programs and activities I've been doing the past 6 months. We've been doing a lot of bee stuff. Earlier this year, we had our first ever beginning beekeeper short course. Debbie Roos had done several in Chatham County and was kind enough to share her course notebook as a guide. And our local beekeeping chapter was they really stepped up to this challenge and was a big help in planning and helping to deliver this program. And just to tell you a little bit about it, we had 30 people enrolled, but you know how it goes, you have a few drop out at the last minute, so we ended up with 25 people from 6 different counties, including South Carolina, and that was kind of neat. Our registration was $35. It covered the cost of $500 worth of door prizes, food. We had a course notebook, and that registration helped to cover stipends for mileage for some master beekeepers that came and presented. And at the end, everyone took the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association written exam to be a certified beekeeper. And everybody passed, so that was cool. Let's see. Okay, so as a result of that class that ended in February, we got a lot of requests within Anson and outside the county to host pollinator days and beekeeping related summer programs for kids, and it seemed like every other week we were getting calls about swarms too. So we've been doing a lot of bee stuff. So and that's all stuff that we hadn't been asked to do before, was a lot of the pollinator days. But I think some of the students in that class were teachers at elementary schools, and so all of a sudden they were wanting us to come in, and that was a lot of fun. The kids had a good time with that. On the left is H.L. Carpenter. He's the president of our Anson County Beekeepers Association, speaking to a group of kids in Union County in May. We reached about 700 kids and adults that one day. We spoke to the whole school and had an observation hive, and that was a thrill for the kids. And I've got 2 more beekeeping summer camps scheduled before the end of this month. So it's a lot of fun to help dispel some of those bee myths and see them come to respect insects, and having us leave and they just have lots of questions and want to know more about it. And plus the handmade cards that you get afterwards in the mail are priceless. But that's what I wanted to cover here real quick. If any of y'all are interested in getting a copy of the notebook we had for class, if you want to put on a beekeeping workshop, something like that, I'll be happy to send you one. I've got a few left over. So that's about it. Anyone have any questions?
All right. Amy, that was great. Do we have a question for Amy? I'm happy to see all that beekeeper activity down there, by the way. All right. We can come back, and if there's any questions, we'll catch up with Amy later toward the end. And now we're going to hear from Linda Blue from Buncombe County. Linda, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. That's excellent news when that actually functions. Like Charlotte, I was going to kind of talk a lot about our how the weather's been going this year. The North Carolina Drought Monitor page, I checked this morning, it has not been updated since last week, and of course is still indicating a lot of North Carolina, including most of the mountains, as being classified either as abnormally dry or in moderate drought. We've been getting scattered rain this week, which has been very spotty. I've only had a little over a ½ an inch at my house, which is the most I've had in the last month or more. But other folks around the area have had as much as a couple of inches. So, it depends very much on exactly where you are, and I'm sure it is much the same across the rest of the state. Maybe we're about to kind of pull out of that cycle. Like Charlotte, we are seeing our share of related blossom end rot and some of the other similar vegetable crop problems. But as we started to realize just how dry it was getting a couple of weeks ago, to where you're seeing just along the roadsides things like rhododendrons and dogwoods and things actually wilting, it kind of brought to mind to think about that we're 2 years now out of our last severe drought event, and what type of repercussions we may still be seeing or be expecting to see from that. It's common in my recollection of past such events that 2 or 3 years following a drought, we'll start to receive phone calls about dying trees, particularly red oak trees apparently are not as drought tolerant as some other trees. I've not been hearing those complaints yet, but wouldn't be too surprised. Also wouldn't be too surprised if in the next year or so we start to see some new cycles of southern pine beetle. That often flares up a couple of years after a drought event, after the pine trees have gotten weakened by drought stress. I mentioned rhododendrons. We're also still seeing a lot of rhododendron problems, both the borers as well as simply the fungus dieback, and probably even a lot of root rot. Still just as, again, follow-up from the severe drought stress that the plants suffered a couple of years ago and are still suffering from those events. Of course, if we continue to be pretty dry, we're just getting into the time of year that it's a good time to be thinking about attacking some of those tough-to-control invasive weed problems. Middle to late summer is often a very good time to get good results on treating things like poison ivy and Oriental bittersweet and Japanese knotweed, but that is assuming that the plants are not drought stressed. So as we're talking with homeowners about getting on top of controlling some of these types of weeds, we also do need to remember to include the note before they pull out the herbicides as to making sure that the weeds are actually not drought stressed before you go about starting to treat them. The weather turning dry actually in some respects was not a bad thing. We did have ample rainfall in May and early June, and of course as a result we're dealing not only with the early blight in the tomatoes and some of those types of things, but a lot of brown patch in the lawns, which of course now has turned from patchy brown lawns to uniform brown lawns because of the drought, of course, which of course brings a halt to the progression of the brown patch. So I often tell folks, if you've got brown patch in lawns, the best thing that could happen is for us to have a little drought for a while to bring a stop to that disease problem, and maybe Matt will be talking some more about things like our brown patch treatments. We also have seen what seems perhaps like an unusual amount of black rot on grapes coming into our master gardener office, and I think probably two factors in there. One is, of course, the amount of wet weather we did having during prime inoculation season, but also we had an excellent set of grapes this year, probably better than usual because the spring weather just cooperated for not getting flower buds frozen for a change and having good pollination, and so having a good fruit set, and then of course having the fungus to be able to set in on all that fruit. We have had been seeing a lot of that, and I suppose at this point, although we are giving the fungicide recommendations to folks, at this point starting up your fungicide sprays will be doing more to reduce your inoculum for next year than it will be for saving your grapes for this year. We also, I don't know if other parts of the state are seeing problems with a new disease, which is downy mildew on basil. We have a number of commercial herb producers around western North Carolina, and several of those unfortunately have experienced problems with the downy mildew on the basil, which is quite difficult to control, especially in light of there being very limited amounts of treatments available. I think the oxidate, which is the peroxide type product, is one of the things that they're using, but I don't know how successfully. Like many downy mildews, it's sort of a losing battle. And one final thought that I had for this time of year is to be keeping a very sharp eye around your lawn and landscape areas right now for yellow jacket nests. This comes to my mind as last weekend I looked down and found my foot standing within inches of bees going in and out of their hole right in the middle of my lawn, which of course I had just mowed over a day or so earlier, which brings to mind that right now the yellow jackets obviously are not yet to that very defensive, aggressive stage. So this is a very good time as their numbers have built, whenever you see a yellow jacket or two in your yard, to try to watch where they're going, to see if you can't spot that nest now while it is pretty safe to be able to get close to it to treat it before in about another, what's Steve, probably 3, 4, or 5 weeks they're going to become very aggressive. With the ones I found, I actually used just about a tablespoon of 7-Dust right there, just dumped right into the hole, and usually when I've done that in the past it's taken several days to a week before you stop seeing bee activity. This time it was 24 hours and I haven't seen a single bee since, so I expect it was a very small nest, not that many bees in it yet. But so just a heads up on that. Keep an eye out for the yellow jackets, so hopefully you can treat them before they get dangerous. That's all I have on my list to report today. Happy to talk to y'all.
Linda. I don't we have any questions out there for Linda, but I would reiterate about those yellow jackets. We were ahead of you because we were already getting some defensive yellow jackets, and I can attest to that. So, next time I come up there, I'm expecting a nice bottle of wine from Buncombe County. So we're looking forward to that. All right. I guess we'll move on then. Linda, thank you very much. That was great. And stick around in case we get some follow-up questions. We are now going to introduce Matt Martin, and he's an Extension Associate in Turfgrass, and we're really happy to have somebody who knows something about turfgrass talk to us. Matt is definitely the man to speak with, and he is going to come to us from Castle Hayne, down there in blueberry country and everything else that's down there. Lots of warm season turf. So Matt, if you're there, would you like to take it away? Go ahead, Matt. Are you there? I see you're on. Okay, Lee J, are we having a problem?
Matt, well, it looks like his microphone is on. Matt, if you're there, could you type into the chat window? Let us know.
I can't sing, so he better get this problem fixed out. Dave or Mike, are you there by any chance, in case we want to change the schedule around? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Dave just stepped out a second ago, but we'll go if you need us to.
Okay. Okay, we're working on this Matt's setup again and see if we can get his audio. If not, we'll adjust the schedule, so if you just bear with us for another few seconds.
All right, it looks like Matt has gone through the audio setup with it and is still having problems. So Mike, why don't you go ahead and start your section, and we will come back to Matt.
All right, let me jump down to Dave, who will be on the program first, but I will take the opportunity to make a couple of comments about, can everybody hear me first of all? Give me a green check if you're hearing me. Okay, great. Just first of all, thank you for the excellent presentations about what's going on out in the county. It's always great to hear what's going on, and I'm always impressed by the quality of people working out in the counties and the programs that are going on. I wanted to mention a few things that were disease related. Charlotte, it was interesting what you said about TSWV having a second wave on tomatoes. I don't know the explanation for that. We had only 5 samples come into the clinic this year with positive TSWV diagnoses, and they came in between May 4th and June 15th. The second wave, I suppose it could be secondary spread within the garden, but I suspect, and this is only conjecture, that the dry weather is forcing the thrips to abandon weeds that are drying up around the gardens and move in and bring the virus with them. I thought the person who asked about the Japanese maple got a great answer from Charlotte. The drought stress is certainly a likely possibility, or maybe some kind of root problem. You have to look at how long the plant was in the landscape. That first year is often very hard on them. Remember last month too, we had Dave talk to us about pine vole in the example that he gave was from a Japanese maple that came in, so there's another little possibility you could check out. If you're seeing individual branches dying rather than the whole tree showing symptoms and dying back from the tips, well, you'd have to look at the possibility of something like a Botrytis canker or something like that. Let's see, what else was there? And Linda's comments about downy mildew I thought were really interesting, because we have not yet seen a sample in the clinic of downy mildew on basil. The dry weather, I imagine, is keeping that a little bit under check. And just to second her comment, though, about the long-term effects of these droughts, it is known that dry weather, drought stress will increase susceptibility to canker diseases in woody plants, and we believe also to armillaria. We were seeing a lot of oaks dying, I would say maybe last year more than this, from armillaria, and we think it's due to increased susceptibility from the droughts that had occurred a few years before. So let me now pass off to Dave here, and he'll take it away with his prepared presentation.
Okay, I guess we're up and ready to run here. I'd like to say something, as Mike made a few comments there before, just before me, say something about yellow jackets here, following Linda's comments on them. Advocate for yellow jackets a little bit because they're not entirely bad. Certainly when you encounter a nest in a high traffic situation like the middle of your lawn, you're going to want to take some kind of measure to control them because of the potential for getting stung. But I encounter yellow jacket nests in my yard just about every year, and if they're in a out-of-the-way spot, off the beaten path, so to speak, I usually leave them there because they are beneficial to some degree. They're predators on other insects, so they're going to capture caterpillars, potential crop or garden pests. And the most common species, at least in the eastern two-thirds of the state, the species called the eastern yellow jacket, is frequently a scavenger. So while it may be a nuisance around picnics or you got food outdoors, they'll also help clean up dead things. I've seen them on carcasses of animals, and so they're oftentimes beneficial, and if the nest is in a place where it's not likely to cause problems, I'm inclined to just leave them be. But that's my piece about yellow jackets. So I'm going to start here, and I've got a few insects that were left over from the presentation of 2 months ago, so the slides are in a little bit different format. I'm going to bounce around a bit, and I apologize for that. I didn't get back and correct everything. Well, I want to start off talking about pests of pine, in particular Pathogens weevils here. There are many different kinds of borers. The term borer is kind of a catch-all term for anything that's living in the stem or trunk branch of woody plants, or sometimes semi-woody plants, things like tobacco, tomato, for example. And in pines, there are several kinds of weevils that are, well, pines and other conifers, several kinds of weevils that are major pests. One of the most damaging and widespread groups is the genus Pathogens. There are some related genera of weevils, Hylobius and Pachylobius. The Hylobius is the Paley's weevil, common here in North Carolina. Pachylobius includes the pitch-eating weevil, and one of these days I'll probably get on and make a little presentation about them. But Pathogens weevils cause a great deal of damage. They can flat out kill pines by mining under the bark. Especially species in genus Pinus are attacked, but other conifers in the Pinaceae will also be attacked, both in yards, commercial nursery situations, and in forests. So this is one of the Pathogens weevil. This particular one is called the deodar weevil, Pathogens numerensis. It's one of the more common species here in North Carolina. Some of the more northern species will hibernate in the leaf litter during the winter, but the adults of the Pathogens numerensis, the deodar weevil, may remain active during the winter. Certainly during colder spells, they're going to be out moving it along, and but during the warm weather, they'll be up and active. The Pathogens weevil, the female will chew a small hole in the bark of the wood and lay her egg in there, and then the larva will do the mining. This is a close-up of one of the a trunk of a tree that came in earlier this year, and you can see the. I'm sorry, excuse me a second. Okay, these are the galleries of where the larvae were mining under the wood and scoring the wood. You can see they completely girdled this trunk, so that everything above where these beetles were boring died out completely. Depending on the number, they will kill the leaves or the trunk of the tree, and different species prefer different parts of the tree. Some of them attack only the leader of the trunk, others will attack lower in the bole. After the larvae have matured, they will excavate a deeper cavity within the wood and construct a cocoon. And I'd love to know how they do this, because they're in a very confined space, and yet somehow they manage to cut long fibers of wood, which they weave into a sort of cocoon here just under the bark. And pupate within, there's a close-up of it, and some of these strips, like I say, maybe several millimeters long. I say how they're able to do this is a good question. But it's very characteristic, even if the beetles themselves are absent. If you peel the bark off and see these cocoons in cavities just under the bark, then you know you've had Pathogens weevils of one species or another. Cutting open one of the cocoons, we can see the pupa here. And I noticed that on this pupa, you can see the eyes are starting to pigment up here, and also the tips of the mandibles are starting to get pigment. That means that this pupa is actively developing. If the pupa were going into diapause, that means a prolonged resting stage where it's just kind of in limbo waiting for the right environmental conditions or the right season of the year to begin development, it would be just uniformly whitish in color. But this tells me that this pupa is developing, and that within a couple of weeks the adult is going to be mature. Once the adult has emerged, it may remain within the pupal chamber for a period of days or even weeks. Unlike, for example, butterflies and moths, which emerge from their cocoons and within a few hours they're ready to fly, beetles sometimes take days or even weeks to become fully developed and fully sclerotized, and may spend quite a bit of time remaining within the pupal chamber before emerging. Once they do emerge, the young adults may have to feed for a while before they're able to breed and start laying eggs. We call this maturation feeding, and they can be on the tender foliage of plants. I kept some of these going for a period of weeks, cutting some loblolly pine terminals and putting them in there, and the larvae were feeding, or excuse me, the young adults were feeding on the tender foliage and also on the bark of the new growth of the tree. This where I peeled the bark off, and again you can see these are the pupal chambers, and these neat little holes are where the adult weevil chewed its way out and emerged. Again, even after the beetles are long gone, you can see from the damage, you can recognize very easily that it was one of the Pathoges weevils. I should mention it's very difficult to identify the different species of Pathoges weevil. They tend to look a lot alike. They're all about the same size, rather similar in appearance, and somewhat variable within each species. So it can be challenging to separate the different species from each other. All right, talking about things that are more active right now at this time of year. Leaf beetles are one of the largest families of beetles in the world. There's something like at least 35,000 species that have been described so far, and there are estimates of up to 60,000 species possible total in the world. Just in America, north of Mexico, there are almost 200 genera of leaf beetles, and about 1,750 species have been described so far. I'm sure there are at least several hundred species in the United States or in North America that have yet to be described and recognized. They are important, great importance to all growing plants, trees, shrubs, herbaceous ornamentals, fruits, vegetables, grains, and other crops may be attacked by different species of leaf beetles. And it can be damage done either by the larvae or by the adults or by both stages of leaf beetles. The larvae of leaf beetles occur in a variety of situations. Many of them are in the soil where they feed on the roots or bore in the roots. Some species feed in the fruit or bore in seeds. They may feed externally on foliage with the adult beetles, or in some cases they may even be leaf miners in the foliage. This particular species is called the larger elm leaf beetle, and it is one of our largest species of leaf beetles. The adults can reach up to a ½ inch in length, maybe a little bit more. And the adults and the larvae of both stages of this species will feed externally on the foliage of elms. Now, most leaf beetles tend to be fairly host-specific. That is to say, they confine their feeding to a single genus or maybe a few closely related genera of plants. And especially in the larval state, they tend to be host-specific. But sometimes adults may be found on a wider range of hosts. For example, the scientific name of the larger elm leaf beetle, Monocystis coralli, suggests that the adult, at least occasionally, is found on hazel or corylus as a possible host. But the primary host seems to be elms. I've seen them occasionally heavy on red elm, Ulmus rubra, also known as slippery elm. They probably will also feed on American elm, winged elm, and possibly some of the Asian elms as well. Not usually a serious pest in general, but occasionally you get an individual tree that may be heavily attacked. Another one of our large damaging leaf beetles is the Colorado potato beetle. In this one also the adults reach almost a ½ inch in length. It is primarily a pest of potato, but sometimes the adults will turn up on tomato, possibly on some of the other solanaceous crops, but I think the larvae are going to be found only on potato. It is a native species. It was probably native to the western United States, where most of the other species in the genus Leptonotarsa occur, and then southward into Mexico and Central and South America. We have one other species of Leptonotarsa here in North Carolina, Leptonotarsa juncta, but it feeds only on horse nettle, Solanum carolinense, and ground cherry. Sometimes ground cherry is grown commercially, tomatillo. I believe that's one of the cultivar or crop names, but the juncta does not attack potato. These are the larvae of the Colorado potato beetle, and like all other larvae in the subfamily Chrysomelinae of the family Chrysomelidae, they do feed externally on the foliage of the host rather than internally or in the soil. All of the larvae of the Chrysomelinae tend to be rather fat, slow-moving, and often brightly colored like this, which suggests that they either taste bad or are poisonous, at least to predators like birds and lizards and frogs. But they certainly do have a variety of natural enemies in terms of insects, either predators or parasitoids that will attack them. And except of course you get a monoculture situation, a garden, a crop, and then these things can spread like wildfire, and the natural enemies aren't able to keep up with them. In addition, some of the other leaf beetles types, the tortoise beetles in the subfamily Cassidinae, they feed externally on foliage. There are a number of species, in particular on morning glory and sweet potato, And some of them will actually use their own excrement to cover their bodies. They have specially designed structures on their backs to help hold this, and presumably this is a defense against predators. Maybe it also helps protect them from drying out. But it sounds pretty disgusting, but hey, it's what works for them. Flea beetles are a large group of mostly rather small beetles. Again, it's a tribe, in this case, Alphocinae, one of the leaf beetle groups. And flea beetles, many species, hundreds of species of these things, and many of them are very important pests of a variety of crops. Most of the species of flea beetles in the United States are less than a quarter inch long, usually between a 1/16 of an eighth or an eighth of an inch long. And they get the name because the femur here of the hind leg is enlarged, just like in grasshoppers or in fleas or crickets. And they are excellent jumpers. They can, adult flea beetle, just an eighth of an inch long, can jump several inches. They're quite active, they see well, and they can be hard to catch. Adults typically feed on the foliage, often leaving small holes scattered all around the leaves. The larvae of many flea beetles feed on roots, but then there are some other flea beetle larvae which feed on the foliage. Again, flea beetles tend to be fairly host-specific, especially in the larval stage, but then the adults of some species will feed on a wide range of crops. I apologize, not a great picture here, but this is the same species as in the previous slide. This one's called the red-headed flea beetle, Cystina frontalis. We do have several species of Cystina here in North Carolina, and the adults may be pests on quite a wide range of plants. The larvae of Cystina live in the soil, but we don't know too much about them, especially in terms of what species of plants they occur on. We just know that the larvae are in the soil feeding on the roots. Now, several species of Cystina have unusually diverse host ranges. And the adults of Cystina frontalis, in North Carolina, we've got records of them from corn, forsythia, hydrangea, and rose, among other plants. In Florida, they've been reported from several varieties of beans, carrots, okra, sweet potato, crepe myrtle. Wisconsin, they've been reported from alfalfa, blueberry, cranberry, and several species of weeds growing in cranberry and blueberry, and I'm sure another wide range of other plants as well. So it's rather unusual for a single species of flea beetle, or any leaf beetle for that matter, to have so many recorded host plants, but that seems to be what they do. All right, one of the favorites with collectors everywhere, and I was a kid growing up in New York State, and we did not have these there, and like Luna moths and giant Hercules beetles, I probably would have given my right arm to catch one of these things. This one was actually captured last month. You remember, some of you folks may remember that June is unofficially Big Bug Month. That's when many of our largest and showiest insects are active. But as a group, the family Lucanidae stag beetles, there are about 800 species of them worldwide, and it seems to be especially a diverse group in Asia, but they occur in all continents except for Antarctica, of course. We only have about 24 species of them here in North America. The larvae are of no economic importance, really. They feed in decaying wood that's been dead for several years and is really getting kind of soft and rotten. The adults may live for some weeks. In the wild, they will feed on tree sap, on fruit, or in the case of some smaller species, they may feed in the flowers. Some of these stag beetles are very large, reaching lengths of 3 or 4 inches. And within the genus Lucanus, some species, the males have these enlarged mandibles like this. Other species, the mandibles are much smaller. But even though they are of no economic importance, really, they are understandably very popular with collectors. So the giant stag beetle, the one pictured here, this is the largest species we have in North Carolina. Adults appear in June and they're active into July. We have about 3 or 4 species in the genus Lucanus here in North Carolina, and not all of them have males with enlarged mandibles like this. In some cases, the males and females are very similar in appearance. But the adults may be kept alive for several weeks by offering them mashed fruit. These mandibles are actually pretty useless for feeding. The males use them in wrestling to establish dominance and breeding rights and who gets the female. And but they do have small mouth parts not visible in this image, and you take things like banana, grape, apple, other kinds of fruit, mash it up and offer it to them in a bottle cap. something like that, and say they can live for several weeks like that. The larvae are found in decaying logs and stumps of hardwoods. I don't think this species goes for pine, but various other hardwoods it will, and they can take several years to reach maturity. Some of the larger species of Lucanus occur in Europe and Asia. Some of them reach much larger size than this and are extremely impressive. And just in case anybody was tempted to try it out, they will bite painfully. I can speak from personal experience on that, and it's something I don't plan on trying again.
I roll the tape.
Excuse me?
Or show the video of that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. We do have a little bit of a video tape of this giant stag. Well, I'm going to let Mike roll that for us.
Let's see if I can get this to work.
So the video of the giant stag beetle hacking is linked on YouTube. And once that comes up, you can click on play.
Did that come through? Huh. Got somebody who says their county blocks YouTube. Okay, proceed, Dave.
All right. Well, for those of you who saw it, that was a clip from one of the classic 1950s movies, Attack of the Giant Stag Beetle. We find it on late night TV sometimes. Okay, moving along, spiders. This is also a season of the year when some of our larger spiders are active, and in fact I'm thinking about doing an all-spider presentation for September when many of the orb weavers are mature. But the fishing spiders, family Pathology, this is a small family. We only have 2 genera of them in the United States. They are medium to sometimes quite large spiders, close relatives to the wolf spiders, which are the family Lycosidae, rather similar in the general appearance, though with some behavioral differences. Fishing spiders are usually found near water, that's where they get their name. They're usually arboreal in vegetation or found resting on vertical surfaces. You usually don't find them on the ground like you find wolf spiders. They are ambush predators. They sit and wait till something appropriate crosses their field of view, and then they'll pounce on it. And they're very fast, sometimes disturbingly fast. They can spin silk, of course, like all spiders do, but they don't use silk to capture their prey. They don't spin webs to capture prey. The females of some species will spin a nursery web over the tips of vegetation in which they lay their eggs, and then they may stand guard there until the eggs hatch. Some other species of fishing spiders, the female spins a tight, rounded cocoon, and then she carries around in her palps. And these small structures on the front of the head are mouth parts. They're called the palps, and she'll carry them there. That's a distinctive another way of recognizing fishing spiders from wolf spiders. The fishing spiders of the genus Dolomedes, we have several species of them here in North Carolina. Most species of Dolomedes are found near the water's edge. They may be found resting with the tips of their front legs actually on the surface film of the water while their hind legs are hooked to vegetation or a log or a rock or something like that. They'll capture insects, even the larvae of tadpoles, larvae of frogs and toads, and small fish if they come near. But our 2 largest species of fishing spiders, Dolomedes scriptus and Dolomedes tenebrosus, are often found some distance from water. Found on tree trunks, the foundations or exteriors of homes and crawl spaces, and somehow they even manage to get indoors, which can be extremely disturbing when you encounter one of these things on your wall inside. This particular one here was found on a person's deck. They had an old curtain out there on the deck, and there were a couple of these spiders hanging around on the curtain. In life, the females are larger than the males, and the female may have a body length that exceeds an inch with legs spanning up to 3 inches or more. And of course, like snakes, when you first encounter these things, they look much bigger than they really are. But like almost all other spiders, they are not aggressive toward people. Their first instinct is just freeze and let camouflage hide them. If that doesn't work, they may dart around the backside of whatever they're hiding on, like a squirrel going around a tree trunk to avoid a predator. And they may even jump and run if pursued, but they're not jumping to attack. And a bite would be painful, but the venom is not dangerous to humans. This is a sample that just came in this past weekend, the giant resin bee. So I tossed this one in to cover it in case people encounter it. This is a species that is introduced. It's native to Southeast Asia, and it was first reported from the United States from specimens found right here on campus at NCSU back in 1994. One of our beekeeping people noticed this bee and collected some of them and investigated what they were, because nobody had ever seen anything quite like this before. They belong to the family of bees called the leafcutter bees, but this is far larger than just about any of our native species of leafcutter bees. Once the word got out, people started looking for these things, and within a few years they were being reported from most of the states in the southeastern U.S. and even as far north as New York State. They are solitary nesters like the vast majority of other bees and wasps, so they are not aggressive about defending their nest the way social species are. Anybody who's ever tangled with either yellow jackets, which are wasps, or with honeybees or bumblebees knows that they can be very aggressive about defending their nests, but the solitary species are not. Females of the giant resin bee often nest inside within a pre-existing gallery, and they seem to really like carpenter bee galleries, which they may clean out and use for themselves. Or, where they get the name from the resin bee, they may construct a tube using resin or sap from trees, and the tube may be under the loose bark on a dead tree, under siding on a house, or maybe behind shutters, some kind of similar situation like that. These specimens, like the females of most other bees, this species feeds on nectar, and then they gather pollen with which they provide provisions for their larvae. The female will gather enough pollen, place it within a cell, lay a single egg on that, then seal the cell up and begin gathering pollen for the next. The adults of both sexes of the giant resin bee are especially visible on the blossoms of golden rain tree, Pollinators. There's a couple species of them that are planted, and those start to bloom about the end of May and continue through June. Pollinators is extremely popular for all kinds of bees and wasps, so it's a great either nectar or pollen source, probably nectar because you see many wasp bees on too. But the giant resin bee has also been observed on the blossoms of privet, ligustrum species, and on blossoms of vitex species. Now in this case, these particular bees were photographed in Wake Forest just this past Saturday, and they had a shower there overnight, lucky folks up there. And a fellow noticed these things, and you can see that they seem to be congregated around the mortar in the bricks. This is a fairly new building, and it's possible, speculating here, that since some other nectar-feeding insects like butterflies are often attracted to mud puddles where they're getting salts or minerals from the mud, it's possible these bees are attracted to this location because they're getting some salt from the mortar. But that's just a speculation. Fortunately, this species, even though it's an introduced exotic species, does not seem to be causing much damage. It sort of found a niche for itself in the habitat out there, and we're not aware of it causing any problems as far as displacing native species of bees or causing damage to speak of to plants or structural situations. But the jury is still out on that one, and it may prove to be a pest in some way on down the road. A critter that people often find in their yards and send to us is this particular species of stink bug. Now, these are nymphs. Now, most species of stink bugs are plant feeders or phytophagous, and many stink bugs are serious pests of fruit trees, vegetables, and other crops. But there are some stink bugs that are predators, both as nymphs and adults. Predatory insects usually live solitary lives, and that's the norm for them because they've got to feed on other insects and they don't like a whole lot of competition from others of their own species. But the nymphs of this particular species will often aggregate together, at least at rest, and they're very conspicuous in this way. The nymphs may scatter to feed, but they've also been observed feeding as a group on prey that might be much too large for an individual nymph to capture. So I've never seen it, but I can imagine a pack of these things surrounding a hornworm and taking it down just like a pack of wolves would take down a moose somewhere in the Great White North. They are beneficial, and documented prey of this particular species of stink bug include other species of stink bugs, a variety of caterpillar species, Colorado potato beetle, Japanese beetle, Mexican bean beetle, and additional insects that are considered to be crop pests. I'm sorry this is not a great picture, but say the aggregating behavior of the nymphs of this species is especially interesting given the fact that they are predators. But nymphs of other species of bugs are also well known to aggregate. For example, box elder bug, large milkweed bug, and the wheel bug, which is also a predator. And they may remain together as nymphs throughout their development, or at least partway through their development. The benefits of aggregating like this is probably they gain protection. Even though each individual nymph has scent glands and perhaps a bad taste as well, by presenting a sort of a more vivid visual display like this, they probably gain additional protection by staying together. So in addition to being able to take down larger prey, they're probably better protected against potential natural enemies. I didn't have an image of the adult of this species, but it's about a ½ inch long. It's shaped like a typical stink bug. It's a deep blue, black, gunmetal blue color, just like the nymphs, with 3 orange spots in the middle of the back. Okay, last critter I'm going to do here, and this is the oblique-banded leaf roller. Again, this is one of my slides left over from before. The species belongs to a very large group of moths called the tortricid moths. They are mostly small, but they are often very important pests in forestry, fruit trees, field crops, nurseries, landscape ornamentals, and so on. Larvae of the tortricid moths may be leaf rollers, leaf tires, fruit worms, budworms, or borers in the stems, seeds, stems, or the roots. This one, the leaf nest has been torn open on a cherry, and there's the larva within. As a close-up of the larva, the oblique-banded leaf roller will feed on a very wide range of trees and herbaceous plants. I won't try to list some of those here. The other species in the genus Coristinura are also pests, and probably the most famous or infamous of these is the spruce budworm, which is a serious forestry pest in our northern states in Canada, but is not a problem this far south in North Carolina. I reared the adult of this one out. Here is a specimen next to a penny. They often have this somewhat curved or sinuous curve on the wings. That's one of the features of many of their tortricid moths. And a close-up of it shows these oblique, often parallel bands. Many of the species of tortricids have similar, something went a little haywire there. Many of the species of tortricids often have these oblique markings on the wings, and as you can imagine, this is somewhat well camouflaged with a brown color. But when the wings are spread, they are often extremely colorful with very intricate patterns. And again, another time I may get some of the other species in there. And I've been talking away for about a ½ hour now, so I'll quit and let Mike go. And maybe if Matt's got his audio fixed, we can get back to him. If there are any questions, I'll try to entertain them now or at the end of the session.
And a question,
okay. David, that was very good. I think maybe we'll hold questions till the end on this and make sure that we give Matt enough time. So Matt had a small microphone malfunction, and I think he is up and ready. Are you there, Matt?
I'm here, Steve. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, go ahead. Take it over. Lee J, do we know where to get Matt back on his slides?
I think a lot of people would rather me be mute than listen to me talk anyway. So, all right. Well, can everybody hear me okay now? Stu, we're good to go. Thank you guys for the invitation, and I'm glad to speak on turf management today. It's definitely a big topic, so we'll cover quite a few things today. Try to talk about some of the current things that are going on in turf, and talk a little bit about cool and warm season turf and some of the things that we're seeing out there right now. always want to profile our website for turf files. Thank Jennifer Jordan Reynolds, our webmaster. She does a great job. We have lots of things up on turf files. If you haven't already seen the water aids, I'll put the pointer on the water aids. Let's see, and there are some places on turf files where we can definitely help our homeowners, specifically with the water aids, the TIMS program, turf irrigation management systems, as well as obviously some of the pictures, weed aids, disease aids. Okay, so obviously with turf, lots of things we think about in terms of the growth habit of grass plants. The fescue, I'll go on to the next slide here, our bunch type grasses, our stoloniferous grasses, our rhizomatous grasses, and then the very tough stoloniferous and rhizomatous grasses like Bermuda grass and zoysia. I will talk a little bit about tall fescue, and again, as it being a bunch type grass, not spreading. I heard Linda talking about the fact that when it does again get very dry, we definitely can slow down some of the pathogens on the plant a little bit. One of the questions we get with turf a lot is, I think people sometimes want to figure out, what the problem is before they maybe address some of the things they may be doing with the plant. Turf's definitely a long-term care plant. The longer you have sort of a functioning program for it, definitely seems to help. I think have a better overall plan for what you're going to do, having good fertility program practices, good cultural practices as far as aerification when necessary, good waterment practices. And I know all the agents out there and myself, the questions we get are so much related to pest management, and sometimes people don't want to think about the other things, the fertility, the cultural practices, how they may impact, how pests may be impacting them. One of the things that I see the most issues sometimes with are where people go in and they plant turf and they really don't look at where it's going to grow for the long term. They don't think about their trees, how much they're getting bigger every year, and especially a lot of times they don't go in and do the right kind of soil modification. I know, like Charlotte, we're down on the coast, and I'm based out of Castle Hayne, and everybody thinks things down here are basically just sand. And even in sand, there's definitely reasons where we want to modify the soils, get the nutrient levels amended so that we can have good growing conditions for the life of the turf. The other thing that's happening for sure over the last few years, and I heard Linda mention it too, is with the drought and definitely a push for warm season grasses moving more towards the western part of the state. Zoysia grass especially being pushed further and further west, as well as people wanting to use warm season grasses because they don't have the stress issues sometimes that we see in the summertime on cool season grasses. We don't typically have a drought in the wintertime. Cool season grasses, thrive through the fall and the winter and the spring. Typically the droughts are in the summer and the fall, and that's when cool season grasses really struggle, or we might struggle to really get the cool season grasses back established. Even though the warm season grass calendar and growing season is very short compared to cool season grasses, there's definitely a push of moving warm season grasses further and further west. So I put a few slides up, just to talk about, what happens if we, do certain things with turf. One of the things we see quite often in both cool and warm season grasses is people that might tend to over-fertilize sometimes. Maybe they don't have a handle on how to use a spreader. They don't have a handle on how to calibrate how much fertilizer they need. But that leads to further problems down the road. It leads to excessive growth, sometimes where you might need to mow that grass 2 or 3 times a week. It leads to the increased disease susceptibility sometimes in plant, and definitely the increased need for water. When you put more nitrogen into that plant, it's going to want more water because it's going to try to grow harder. The opposite is under-fertilizing. And under-fertilizing, sometimes with species like centipede, it really doesn't matter if we under-fertilize. But Bermuda grass, it matters tremendously because it has very vigorous growth. And the same is true even with some of the newer zoysia grasses that are coming out. They definitely have more of a demand for more fertility or more nitrogen to keep up with the growth that the species has. The other thing sometimes we do is we increase the susceptibility of diseases like dollar spot or even like gray leaf spot in St. Augustine grass. Now, I know in the eastern part of the state, especially down when we get near the coast, it almost seems like homes sometimes don't come without irrigation systems, and it can be hard to, in a lot of cases, really grow quality turf without some sort of irrigation or some sort of water source when we get in very dry periods. The problem really comes is that I think most people don't understand, especially if they have an irrigation system installed or have one in their home, they really don't understand sometimes how to use that. And in a lot of cases, they overuse it. They put out way too much water, or they put out water when really we don't need water. And I guess the last bullet there is probably what I know the agents in the east, I'm sure in the west where we have a lot of irrigation as well, it really makes a great environment for turf fungi. And in a lot of cases, you might even water yourself into kind of a long-term disease problem just by watering the wrong time of the year and really letting that disease harbor and get established in the turf. And since I've got a lot of slides today, and I won't go through all of them, I want to make sure we understand that we almost never need daily irrigation except during establishment. I heard Linda say, again, sometimes the best thing you can do with cool season grasses is let those grasses go into a period of dormancy during the summer. It may not be the prettiest turf, but it's going to get you away from some of the problems that may be associated with having to water a lot. Again, maybe the cost of the water, the cost of fungicides to keep that turf healthy and not to continue to die maybe from fungi that are out there. And a lot of the research that we have looked at over the last few years really suggests that if you apply a ½ inch of water 2 times a week, that's sufficient to maintain, acceptable turf quality. It may not be the best turf quality, but it's acceptable turf quality, and it's turf quality that, does look, good enough, that people don't feel like they're losing grass, but it also may not be the most lush and vigorous turf that we see by applying excessive water. Let me skip over to one other slide here. Actually, I'll go back. We talk about this cool season growth calendar. When do the roots grow? Right now with cool season grasses, we basically roots, and most cool season grasses from a period of June, July, and August basically lose about 25% of that root system through the summer. And we definitely see this on golf course putting greens, bent grass putting greens, and golf course superintendents are seeing that where they lost tremendous amounts of roots in June based on, again, having 20 of the 30 days above 90 degrees. Warm season grasses, we're really in the peak of root growth right now, And it's why over the summer your grass should get, warm season turf should get more and more drought tolerant over the summer as it develops more roots, as we get into this more humid period where the evapotranspiration demand is not as great on the grasses. So I'll go back for just a second. Again, minimum temperature for roots on cool season grasses, about 30, 32 degrees, 33, 34 degrees. Optimally, they grow best about 50 to 60 degrees, and the shoots grow about 60 to 75 degrees. When we fertilize cool season grasses, we put out basically about 20% of our nitrogen in the spring. In the summer, we do, I would say on tall fescue and in lawns, we probably don't do any nitrogen. This is probably more reserved for putting greens, where we do put out a little bit of nitrogen. But in the fall and the winter is where we put out the predominant amount of nitrogen so that we can get growth and also enhance root growth when we need it in the spring. Warm season grasses, again, right now is optimal time for root growth, optimal time for shoot growth, and that'll continue on into September and early October, depending on where you are in the state. I know down on the coast sometimes we'll grow warm season grasses all the way until Thanksgiving, or they'll stay green until Thanksgiving. And you know, warm season grass fertility, a little different, putting out about most of your fertility in the spring and early summer, and very little fertility in the fall. And I would say on St. Augustine and centipede, you don't want to be putting out any nitrogen in the fall. I would stop putting out nitrogen on those grasses maybe in August to really wean them out of nitrogen in their plant tissue as we get into the fall. This little graph is in Carolina lawns, and we won't spend a lot of time here. I do want to point you to some of the fertility recommendations again for zoysia grass. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Zoysia is where we've seen a little bit more in terms of development in species, and with those species we've probably we changed a little bit of our fertility recommendations, and you'll probably see these zoysia grasses, especially over the next few years, more and more of the wider blade zoysia grasses kind of taking over the market. They're a little more homeowner friendly. So, I'll get down to the last bullet here. Really, with cool season grasses, if we can fertilize tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, our cool season grasses 3 times a year, sometime around Labor Day, sometime around Thanksgiving, and sometime around Valentine's Day, with about 1 pound of nitrogen, that is going to be the time, or the time when that plant, when you can fertilize and not get yourself in trouble. This year on Valentine's Day, I had a lot of people asking, well, the ground's still frozen, and how are we going to fertilize now? So this year was probably one year where people might have delayed even a little bit more and gone towards the 1st of March to fertilize those cool season grasses because of such an extreme winter as we had. But those 3 dates, very easy to remember, and getting that. We recommend 3 pounds of nitrogen in most of our recommendations. I think commercial landscapers might tend more towards the 3.5 to 4 pounds of nitrogen. So there may be a little difference in terms of what a landscaping company may be putting a little more nitrogen out in that Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day time frame than what we recommend in our publications. Let's talk real quickly about just a few things with cool season grasses. Most cool season grasses are seeded, or in a lot of cases sodded, where we need quick establishment. The other thing with cool season grasses we do quite often is we combine 2 or 3 or 2 or more cultivars, and in some cases we might combine 2 species together so that we get the benefit of having disease resistance from something like having bluegrass in our system and not all tall fescue. Just a quick look at the points or the, I think my labeling may not be showing up here. The leaf blade on the top is a tall fescue leaf blade, and it has very ribbed top portion of the leaf. The leaf blade on the bottom is Kentucky bluegrass, and a very distinguished feature with Kentucky bluegrass is, and Lee J, you may have to help me here, I'm having a hard time with my pointer, is this boat-shaped tip on Kentucky bluegrass. And that boat-shaped tip is a distinguishing feature that we see on all bluegrass or all bluegrasses. So if you're not sure whether it's fescue or bluegrass, you can look at that tip. You can also look at that ribbing in the leaf blade to help you with that identification. With cool season grasses, you know, we think about pests being basically, you know, insect pests being grubs a lot. We definitely think about grubs being more of a pest in cool season turf than we do in warm season turf. And so we have, you know, varying white grub species throughout the season. Probably, obviously, the most common ones that we see in the central part of the state would be Japanese beetles, green June beetles. And then, again, as we move further west, sometimes we'll find more and more of the black Atenius beetles as well showing up. But for the most part, green June beetles, Japanese beetles comprise a lot of what we see in cool season turf. The other thing we see with cool season grasses, and this is with tall fescue, are common diseases that happen. Most of them happen during the more stressful periods of growing. Spring not being a stressful period, but definitely fall can be a stressful period. But the biggest time where we see problems with diseases would be in the summertime. And I'll show a few pictures of brown patch, Pythium blight, and gray leaf spot coming up just so you can see some identifying features on those diseases. Here's brown patch and tall fescue, making the circular rings in the grass. Let's go to the next slide here. Here's actually right outside of, I guess, Kilgore Hall, where we have centipede being the lighter color grass and the strips of tall fescue being the darker color grass. And you can see how the tall fescue during the summer has infected the cool season turf and is not affecting the warm season turf at all. And both of these, the tall fescue brown patch is Rhizoctonia solani. The large patch that we see in the warm season grasses is also a Rhizoctonia solani. They're just different subspecies, and they occur at different times of the year. Here's a little close-up look of brown patch on that tall fescue leaf. You can see the shape of that infection on the leaf. And again, it's not going to have the white margin like sometimes we see with dollar spot. It's going to have more of a brown, tannish margin with a white interior. And then this is gray leaf spot on tall fescue on the left, and actually on St. Augustine on the right. It has more of a round, almost dollar spot-like lesion, but again has more of a brown margin rather than a whitish margin. And then here's gray leaf spot affecting the turf. And the other one we see sometimes also in tall fescue would be Pythium blight. And here's Pythium blight in some of our plots out at Lake Wheeler. And here's a close-up picture of Pythium blight and the mycelium that Pythium blight is developing. And if you notice the leaves under here around the mycelium, once this disease really takes hold, the entire leaf collapses, and it doesn't allow that plant to continue, or you'll see almost total destruction of the plant through that collapse, whereas brown patch may move a little slower. You may see that leaf infection for just a little longer before you see the turf totally die off. All right, so a few last things on cool season grasses. How do we manage diseases in tall fescue, as well as even bluegrass. And Kentucky bluegrass doesn't have the same diseases as tall fescue. You won't see brown patch in Kentucky bluegrass, but you may see some other diseases like dollar spot, summer patch be problematic in Kentucky bluegrass. But some things to help yourself with disease management in tall fescue, again, minimize those nitrogen levels going into the summer, mowing regularly. If you're going to irrigate, continue to irrigate your tall fescue, make sure you do it early in the day, you do it deep, and you try to do it as infrequent as possible. And again, try to make every attempt to have good airflow and get other obstacles away so that that turf is going to get air movement. That's critical with cool season grasses, to have good air exchange, good airflow, so that canopy doesn't hold water. All right, and I did want to mention brown patch control. You know, a lot of products out there for brown patch control. The ones that we find probably most effective for brown patch and tall fescue are the QOI family of fungicides, the Heritage, Insignia, Disarm. And I have heard, and I actually have used this product myself. Heritage is out now. That is a Syngenta product. That product is out in a granular formulation. Very homeowner friendly. I've actually used it a little bit on some large patch work that we're doing down here, and Lee Butler and Lane Treadway have used this in some of their brown patch research work, and it really works very well on brown patch and tall fescue. You can actually buy that product, homeowners can, in Lowe's under the name of Max Force, and I think that's actually out there now, but hopefully we're getting a little easier products for our homeowners to use that go out even. Maybe they can put it out with, again, a spreader and get some of the same benefits as putting one out, putting a liquid formulation of that fungicide out. All right, let's switch gears real quickly to some warm season grasses. And I see Karen just popped up, and yeah, I will talk about brown patch on zoysia here in just a second, Karen. We'll touch on that real quickly. Let's quickly talk about the 4 major warm season grasses that we see. First, starting with Bermuda grass. You know, obviously Bermuda grass has lots of uses, lots really of high maintenance uses. And, you know, when we look at what do we do with Bermuda grass throughout the year, I think a couple things come to mind. Number one, mowing it low is very important, and mowing it frequently. The more you mow Bermuda grass, especially our hybrid Bermuda grasses like Tifway, Tif Sport, and even Celebration is a newer Bermuda grass out there. As you mow those over 1.5 inches, 2 inches, they become very stalky. And then a lot of times people will go in and mow infrequently, and when they cut the top of that plant off, they'll just be left with a stem. And so again, we want to make sure people mow low. Also fertilize it regularly. Even if we use slow release fertilizers, Bermuda grass definitely a hungry grass, and we need to fertilize it regularly, as well as the aerifying, trying to do some sort of thinning cultural practice every year on Bermuda. What do we see common pests on Bermuda? Well, in the eastern part of the state, southeastern part, we see mole crickets as a very common pest. Throughout the state, especially in the middle part of the state, we see a lot of spring dead spot. And then we see nematodes, definitely a problem on Bermuda grass and some of our sandier soil. See a question about how many applications of Heritage will be required and at what intervals. And basically Heritage, those QOI fungicides are 20 to 28 day products. So for the most part, you can get away, and with the lower rate on the Heritage, which is 0.2 ounces on the liquid, on the 1 ounce on the liquid formulation. It's 0.2 on the water dispersible granule, And you can put that out about every 30 days and get good control. I don't know what the rate is on the granular, but you can put that out at the low rate and still get good control on tall fescue. Okay. Let's see, centipede grass. Different than Bermuda grass, centipede being very slow growing, and the difference, very different than Bermuda grass. Mow centipede low. I would not raise the mowing height up in the fall on centipede. I would keep it mowed low. That's sometimes some of the problems that we see is high, thick, lush centipede. And if you're going to fertilize centipede, maybe doing a one time a year with about a half a pound of nitrogen, and not necessarily needing to core or top dress, do a lot of things to cultural practices like that with centipede. Some of the common centipede pests we see, large patch, and especially, let's say, from I-95 East, ground pearls are a major pest, not only in centipede, but in other warm season turf, but they definitely seem to affect centipede worse than other grasses. All right, zoysia grass. Zoysia grass, the biggest difference now that I see with zoysia is we have fine blade zoysias and we have coarser blade zoysias. And those fine blades probably need to be reel mowed to really look the best. The coarser blade zoysias can be rotary mowed, and they can be mowed a little higher, up 1.5 inches, maybe even 2.5 inches. The other thing with zoysia is it needs regular fertility through the summer. Similar to Bermuda, but maybe not the same rates. And also thinning. Again, we can cut our nitrogen rates back just a little bit, but thinning, doing some type of coring or vertical mowing every year to try to help prevent thatch on zoysia. And again, some of the zoysia pests, mole crickets, obviously in the east, nematodes can be a big pest, and then large patch. And I'll spend just a second talking about large patch. A brown patch and tall fescue is more of a summertime disease. Large patch on our warm season grasses in centipede, St. Augustine, and zoysia really start around Labor Day. And watering is critical on those as well as fertilizing. So getting people to lay off the nitrogen late in the season as well as getting them off watering is going to help as much as anything. The fungicide use, if you're going to use a fungicide to prevent brown or large patch, you need to initiate it really in September, and sometimes even a little earlier in the eastern part of the state. But there are a lot of good fungicides out there. Those QOI fungicides seem to work the best. Bayer actually has a program they're working with some landscapers on using not only those QOI fungicides, but some newer DMI fungicides that are a little cheaper, similar to Balaton or Bannermax. So we are working with some ways maybe to make that program just a little cheaper. I see Karen's question. Actually, let me go a little ahead of that. I have not done any work with Pastora yet. And your question about discoloration on centipede, I've seen where people have been mowing centipede in very high heat where it's been discoloring. You see a lot of tire tracks in centipede right now where people are mowing it and you're getting a little bit of burn on the tips of the leaves from that traffic. And Karen, I'm not sure about large areas of dieback now and zoysia. Sometimes we'll see some problems earlier in the year with a little disease called curvularia that especially people might go in and do a little early scalp on zoysia. Sometimes you'll see that, but I'm not sure what might be causing dieback now. The other thing I might look at with zoysia grass might be bill bugs, and I don't have any information on this as far as bill bugs, but that's definitely an increasing problem we're seeing and takes in zoysia, and especially in the eastern part of the state, and we're seeing it in the west, some in Bermuda, but it'll take on a very appearance of drought stress. and like you just can't get enough water to it. So if you want to call me, we can talk about that some more. Here's that picture of large patch and zoysia. And just so I don't use up all of our time here, let me finish up with St. Augustine. St. Augustine, really the coarsest warm season grass that we've got, needs to be mowed high, 3 to 3.5, maybe even 4 inches in some cases. That's the larger, bigger varieties in Florida. That's what you'll see them mowing it at. And St. Augustine during the summer months grows very aggressively when we get rain. I have St. Augustine in my yard, and I can mow it 2 times a week, sometimes of the year, very easily, so I don't have to cut too much leaf off if I wait, say, a week to mow it. So it can grow very fast. Needs about a half a pound of N a month to really keep it growing well. And especially in the hot weather like this, sometimes you'll see St. Augustine maybe get some chlorotic look in the turf. Sometimes that might be a combination of gray leaf spots showing up as well. The biggest pest I would caution you to with St. Augustine are chinch bugs. And chinch bugs, we're just starting to see a good wave of chinch bugs come out in our area now. You'll see right now really adults as well as some of the young nymphs. And then here is the chinch bug damage on the turf. Okay, and I'm going to stop there so I don't go over. I have one last question from Brad about Celsius product by Bayer. We have we're doing a lot of work with Celsius right now, and it does show a lot of promise. I don't know if it's going to be as good as promised on all the weeds, but it is very good. One of the nice things is you can spray it in these high temperatures, and it doesn't give you any discoloration. So
okay, Matt, that was great. Hang on. Mike seems to be willing to cede a few minutes of his time too if we have any questions out there while we've got you. That's great. I did have one question from Lee County sent in regarding Japanese beetles, and which are somewhat related to the turf. Not that they're doing so much damage to the turf, but they are in the turf. And the question was, why aren't we seeing very many this year? Or at least they weren't in Lee County. And my analysis, which means I'm just making something up, is that I think that the dry conditions that we were having has really inhibited those places that have not had much rainfall, has inhibited the beetle population, since they are dependent on soil moisture in turf, and both last year and this year we've had a shortage, so it's pretty critical for Japanese beetles. So I think that may be a reason that their populations are down for those of you who have not had that much rain. The other thing you mentioned, green June beetles, and I was up in Maryland this past weekend, and they were having very dry conditions also. They had an overnight rain, and the next morning the green June beetles were just swarming all over the turf in those areas that they were found. So I think you all can look for that. If we get a rain, you might see some green June beetles coming on out. So do we have any other questions for Matt? And I hope he'll stick around, and we can still pull those in before we sign off. Okay, we do have a question from Carrie, Matt.
Yep. Absolutely, winter kill could have been a problem on St. Augustine last year, especially in areas where it may have stayed moist and we may have had freezing of the stems. We didn't statewide probably see as much winter kill as we would have thought, given how the winter, how cold it was. But absolutely every year, even in Wilmington, sometimes I see issues with winter kill on grasses. And not so much sometimes with St. Augustine. A lot of times it's zoysia grass where it stays frozen and those stems stay frozen all year. It first will show up really, as the grass is coming out of dormancy. Those areas just will not green up at all. And sometimes you have to make sure that it wasn't chinch bug damage from the previous fall, where it just left old skeleton stolons on the ground that you'll see sometimes.
All right, let's see. Let's take this one last question, and then we'll let Mike dazzle us with what's going on in the diseases. So from, I don't know if that's Eric or Caldwell County, but what are your thoughts on slow-release fertilizer on tall fescue?
Well, I think the biggest thing you want to think about with slow-release fertilizer on tall fescue is in the spring not to put one out that's such a long-term slow-release product that you're going to push it into April and May with a lot of nitrogen in the leaf tissue. I think slow-release products are probably going to be better suited more for your fall and winter fertilization, and not quite so much slow-release in the spring, because that we'll see tall fescue, we'll see brown patch on tall fescue in May many years. As soon as the rain starts and the humidity starts, it's there.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Let's move on to Mike for a while, and then we'll come back with whatever we have, try to catch in everything else. So thanks again, Matt. And Mike, are you there? Mike Munster.
Yes, I'm here. Let's jump to, all right, there we go. A newly cleaned lab coat there, and haircut, a little better than what it looks like in the picture. I'm only happy to cut my presentation a little short today. The things that I had added at the end were about fruit diseases, and we may not get to those, but you folks probably know more about those than I do. It's a little intimidating trying to follow some of the presentations that we've had today. So it'll give me a chance to kind of weed out some of the fabrications from what I've put together and give you a better presentation next time if we don't get to those. What I do want to do, though, is start out with a little interactive question on the map here. If you look on your toolbar right around here, you'll see that there is, there's a circle, an open circle, and a closed circle. And if you would please draw an open circle over the spot on the map where you're located. If you have not had a significant amount of rain in July, and a closed circle on your spot if you have had an inch of rain or more in July. And we'll just see what the pattern looks like out there. This will also give us a little chance to see how our participants are distributed across the state. Okay, thanks for that. I guess it does fit then what I've put at the top of the presentation, a little talk about heat and drought stress on trees. Like washing your car, it's a good way to bring on rain to decide to talk about these things. And we had some good showers. Looked like they were going to move through yesterday, but then didn't at the end of the day, at least not here. Of course, you're familiar with some of the risk factors for having problems with heat and drought stress on trees that have only been planted within the last year, heat from pavement surrounding it or buildings, and anything that would keep the root system in poor shape or of limited extension that can't pick up the moisture needed to transpire up to the leaves. I went around yesterday and took a bunch of pictures showing some of these symptoms, and the worst trees out there, really one of them is sycamore, and you can see the extensive amount of leaf drop that's been going on, and then these blotches of irregular shape and location on the foliage themselves that clearly aren't symptoms of bacterial leaf scorch or of anthracnose, which are two things that also make sycamores look unpleasant during the summer months. The other tree that's been affected a lot as you drive down the highway, you can see, is yellow poplar. These here are small trees, but even on very large trees, I was noticing this morning the leaves turning yellow, and you can see some defoliation. occurring as well. River birch, I was surprised to see how good it was looking actually yesterday, but a little bit of defoliation there from the stress. Dogwood is a classic for getting stressed out by heat and drought conditions, and here we can see some symptoms on one of our campus trees. Now let's see how well people remember from last year. I think it was that I did a presentation that included the picture on the right, which shows a disorder or disease of dogwood that can have symptoms that look similar to the blotchiness of heat injury, or what we can call scorch. Does anybody want to take a guess as to what that is? You just use your text tool to write that on the text tool is located up here. You want to write a guess on the board. I see Charlotte has written it into the box there and is correct. That's powdery mildew. This brings up a point that I've been asked about, which is if water, as you may have heard or read, is bad for the powdery mildew fungi, why is it that we see more powdery mildew after rainy weather? And my simple explanation for that is that rain is associated with high humidity as well. The amount of increase in the disease because of the increased humidities more than offsets any kind of inhibitory effect that the free moisture would have on them. So I don't think we've probably seen as much powdery mildew this year as we did last, with the weather being what it has. These are also easy to confuse. Scorch due to heat and drought on the oak tree on the left, and see if anybody remembers what the picture on the right is. Oh, no takers on that one. Again, Charlotte. Very good. Bacterial scorch. A little bit different pattern there to the leaf. And on our trusty tree, just a few yards from where we're sitting, well, they're standing now, but the tree in the brickyard here that every year produces symptoms is now showing them. So we are starting to see bacterial scorch. So what should you do? Of course, making sure the trees are properly planted, the hole being properly dug, not too deep. Proper mulching, I'll say a comment about that in a second, and proper watering. One rule of thumb is an inch of water every 7 to 10 days. And an excellent piece of reading here, short and to the point, is at the URL indicated. In fact, Karen Neal was one of the authors on that, a little publication about tree planting and care. Now, if you haven't lately heard a diatribe against volcano mulching of trees, let me give one now. This was at a restaurant here not too far from where I live back in May. I took the picture. This tree has obviously been established for a long time, but had a wonderful volcano of mulch at the base, which on further examination you can see was full of roots that were even trying to girdle the tree. Different explanations of why these volcanoes are bad. Either as they start to decompose, they become repellent to water, which sheds off them away from the root system. Also the fact that the roots do grow into these instead of into the soil. Here's the case on campus where at least they've got a little swale to it so that there'll be water collecting within the saucer here. This I would still say is too deep. There was at least an inch of trunk that had been buried by the mulch here. One recommendation I saw the Durham County put out was to keep a 4-inch space around the trunk of the tree free of mulch. And it was interesting as I went around noting which trees were actually looking pretty good. Ginkgo, I guess if you could survive the Cretaceous period, you could probably survive anything that modern life has to throw at you. It's looking excellent. And surprisingly, the cypress tree, I assume it was a taxodium there on a nice upland site, was also looking quite good. And you will see a lot of variability. Trees of the same species, some looking good and some looking bad under these conditions. All right. Shifting gears only slightly here. Anyone want to take a guess at what this is? Oh, a hat trick for Charlotte. Yes, this is a picture of ozone injury on watermelon. Now, yeah, there you go. Applause. Let's see if quickly people can pull out their little circles and indicate with a solid circle if you've had an ozone alert day last week or not. If you click and drag, you can make your circle slightly larger. Give us an open circle if you have not. I don't see a lot of activity there in the coast, so maybe that means that you've had fewer problems. Okay. All right. Just very quickly, it may cause confusion for some people whether ozone is supposed to be something good or something bad. Well, it's both, depending on where it is. We like ozone up in the stratosphere where it blocks ultraviolet rays, but we don't like it down here at ground level because it's so reactive and it can be harmful to human health as well as plants. Interesting to note that sensitivity to ozone varies greatly among and within plant species, and the ones that we most often diagnosed here at the clinic in the last several years have been tomato, potato, watermelon, and white pine. Here are a few pictures from the archive showing some of the different symptoms. Here on squash, a yellowing, a stippling on bean. Oops, sorry about that. On okra, here on the right on tomato, and it's very similar looking on potato with those tannish spots between the veins. Here on watermelon again. And a little different symptom on some woodies here on one of the cane fruits. And here on white pine. What happens with white pine is that there are certain individual plants that happen to be quite sensitive, even though the species as a whole is only moderately sensitive. And the portion of the needle, only one portion of the needle is going to be sensitive. So when the ozone episode occurred, that part of the needle was injured, and then as it began to continue to grow, which it grows from the fascicle at the base here, the healthier tissue ended up being at the base and the damaged tissue toward the tip. Now, I should point out that you can have growth suppression or early senescence in plants from chronic ozone exposure. So I don't think really we're even fully aware of all the damage that's going on out there. Just because we're not seeing dramatic symptoms like in these photographs doesn't mean that we're not having actually problems from ozone. Less often we would see it on something like rhododendron azalea, but these were pictures that we had in our plant pathology slide collection that I wanted to share. And let's see. Finally here, as far as ozone, just a plant that we might not mind seeing a little more injury to. And with that, I'm just going to go ahead and hold off on the diseases on fruits presentation, try and put that together for next time, but take any questions that you may have about things either that you're seeing right now or on the heat, drought, and ozone problems.
Thanks, Mike. That was great. I think we have about 2 minutes to take questions on Mike's or any of the presentations. We do have a question there, Mike. Do you see that? On treating bacterial scorch on shrubs. It seems like we have lost Mike. Mike, are you there?
Sorry about that. My microphone got turned off. There really is no treatment for bacterial scorch. I could imagine a case where if, let's say, on an oleander, which is one of the shrubs that gets it, where you, by pruning out, theoretically might be able to get it. I don't know that that's ever been proven, though, but because it's systemic in the plant, you really don't have any kind of treatment options, and there are no chemical treatment options either. A lot of fire blight in Pender County. Make sure that those are pruned out for the benefit of next year, and also to try and reduce some of the fruit rots this year. Again, no treatment that I know of for shrubs or trees with ozone damage. Carpooling, public transit, anything that we can do to reduce the air pollution that's causing the problem. Trees showing subsystem now from previous drought in Gaston County. Of course, this is not surprising at all. Large patch and centipede, I'll have to cede that question or pass it off to Matt, because that's out of my area of expertise.
Okay, that sounds great. I have one other thing here. Here's the upcoming schedule, and I want to add one other thing here that Lucy gave me. There it is. All right. There's also this Carolina Canopy workshop. It's about a 3-hour workshop. It's going to be in Hickory on the 16th. It's free if you're a member of the Urban Forest Council, and it's only $10 if you're not. And it is open to master gardeners, so it sounds like a pretty good program if you were up and in that area at any place. So I think that I'd like to thank all of those presenters today. I think they did an excellent job, and we learned a lot, and of course we ran out of time as usual. I want to particularly thank Lee J for all of her help, without which we would be, again, not here. So, summing everything up, again, if you are an agent, if you would register with the LPS or whatever the initials of that thing are, and we'll keep track of it. This will be and is being recorded up until this very moment. So